Mr. Gilman, thank you for being here with us today.
It's my pleasure, and I've only visited North Macedonia once, but I had a wonderful experience, and the people were both welcoming and I thought very generous in terms of their time and interest in the work that I was doing.
Mr. Gilman, according to the Transparency International Corruption Perception Index for 2021, compared to the previous year, North Macedonia was ranked 87th place with 39 points, which is a lap of 24 places compared to the previous year. Do you think that North Macedonia is successfully dealing with corruption? And do you think that this result is related to the country's aspiration to join the European Union?
Well, first, I would not rely on the Transparency International Index. I have written lengthy articles about how misleading it is and unfortunately how it's misused in terms of research. It's a very important tool in terms of getting interest in dealing with corruption. But for that reason, I think that rising and falling on the anti-corruption index is not quite as important as internal evaluation by journalists, for example, in North Macedonia, to understand better what those numbers represent. Are you really seeing a decline, or a decline in news coverage, or a decline in other coverage? Because the index uses business indexes to look at it, which can be very healthy, but they're not necessarily measuring corruption. So I would argue that you are better placed than I am to understand corruption in North Macedonia. And as I said earlier off camera, I think it's important to understand that we're not going to end corruption ever, but rather what we can do is reduce the impact of corruption on the average Macedonian citizen so that they are not influenced, they are not impacted by corrupt politicians, corrupt businessmen, corrupt whoever. And I think that most countries need to strive to get to that point so that the average citizen can say, I'm not impacted on corruption.
Do you think that corruption is the biggest problem in the Western Balkan, which is hindering its prosperity?
Well, I do think it's hindering that prosperity, but it really varies by country in the Balkans, to very honest with you. I think Albania initially started very strong in dealing with corruption 20 years ago. They have slipped backward. There are a number of different elements involved in this. As you well know, the complicated issues in the Balkans goes back generations, actually centuries. And so they complicate the whole issue of corruption. That is, in Albania, they had a huge problem, as one example, in that no matter who was arrested for corruption, they were related in some way, shape, or form to one of the judges. And so how do you get an independent judiciary if everybody has some sort, either direct or indirect relationship? And so they made an effort to try and move the judiciary away from the kind of public influence that was generally when your aunt calls you up and says, you have to let my nephew go. It's very difficult to deal with that, especially as important as family is for everyone in the Balkans. It's a very high priority. So having said that, I think the Balkans confront a lot of different issues. But there have been successes, and I think the point basically that I would make is that for North Macedonia, look at the successes around you. Where have people made a real impact? Things like asset declarations to really understand and make sure that public officials are held to account. Things like effective codes of conduct that are enforced. You have a question about misuse of public office. We're going to be talking about that. But there are all sorts of tools that are available to people if they desire to really impact corruption in their country.
Some analyses indicate that the courts and urbanization authorities are the most corrupt in North Macedonia. Why is corruption present in this segment?
Well, because in effect, there is no accountability usually, and that's where the problem lies. Judges should have financial disclosures. Judges should have codes of conduct. We worked when I was at the UN, we created with I think it was 18 chief justices of courts throughout the world, the Bangalore principles of criminal justice. And I think that holding judges accountable, this is available online through the UN ODC. You can get a copy of the Bangalore Principles and also their implementation guide. And that's one of the things I think journalists look at these broad treaties and say, well, they're so abstract. But in fact, you can take the UN Convention Against Corruption. I don't know if you can see that. But you also have something called the Technical Guide to the UN Convention Against Corruption. That's 5 times the length and gives detailed guidance as to how and in what way these things should be implemented. I remember attending a meeting in which a senior official was responding to people saying, we need more law. And he said, no, we have laws that will put tears in your eyes. Nobody is implementing them. Nobody is making them effective. And I think that's the key in terms of the judiciary and other parts that seem most prone to corruption. What standards are being used? Is there enforcement? Can judges be removed by a judicial panel, keeping judicial integrity and separation intact? But the idea that a judge can simply steal whatever he wants or takes bribes for what he wants or uses influence for whatever he wants seems to me to be self-defeating in terms of the purpose of a judiciary. Remember, in any democracy, the last point that a citizen has to turn to after they've been denied by the legislature or the executive is the judiciary. If the legal system isn't working, nothing will be able to work. And so it's important that North Macedonia, with all of the other problems that we can talk about, really focuses on the integrity of the judiciary. Without that, it's almost going to be impossible to hold the rest of the systems accountable.
Mr. Gilman, according to expert analysis in the country, no corruption cases were reported by students at the country's 2 largest universities in the past 4 years due to legal uncertainty and fear of revenge. How can the state fight corruption if the citizens do not trust the legal system and they are not reporting the corruption?
Well, most countries put in place, and even universities put in place, whistleblower systems, and it trips off the tongue so easily. But it's not merely that people can report, but are they protected, from actions taken against them? And there is guidance given in the technical guide as well as in the Bangalore Principles on how you can protect individuals. Second of all, there has to be some action that takes place. That is, there has to be, if it's reported and confirmed, what is done. In a lot of countries, you can report it, but nothing happens. So why report it? And so what needs to happen is, in fact, the ability to take action against people who misbehave. Professors, deans, college presidents, public servants of any kind have to know that if a transgression occurs, they can get punished for it. It's called accountability. If you have no accountability in a university, and I will tell you, I've worked in a number of countries where you've simply bought your grades. If you want the highest grade possible, it costs X amount of money. And so very wealthy families got away with simply paying for their kids' education. And then, of course, they try and get a job, and they basically have no background and no ability to do anything. So the point basically is holding universities accountable in terms of the integrity of their systems, in terms of bribes asked for, in terms of abuse, sexual abuse. I'm sorry, in universities around the world, you have young people, both men and women, who can be exploited by people in power. And the point basically is, what are you doing to protect them? And to say that that's abstract is nonsense. There are very specific things you can put into law in terms of administrative regulations within universities, in a variety of different places. We're not naked in this. There's a lot of good reference in terms of other countries. Romania, Lithuania, and at one point Albania actually had very effective systems. The key basically is what will work in Macedonia. Don't try and transport things literally, but look at systems that seem to work and those that will fit in Macedonian political system, in Macedonian culture, and in terms of support of citizens for these kinds of actions. So it's important to pay attention to not simply copy, but pay attention of what will fit within the Macedonian context.
From this point, what is the most effective way to curb corruption, especially in a small developing country like North Macedonia?
I think the key is, and again I'll refer to the technical guide, how do you prevent misuse of position? How do you prevent misuse of position? And I don't want to do this abstractly. There are laws in a variety of different countries. This is just one example. An employee may not use his public office for his own private gain or for that of persons or organizations in which he is associated with personally. An employee's position or title should not be used to coerce, to endorse any product, service, enterprise, or the appearance of governmental sanction. And I could go on, but the point basically is this is enforced in many countries by criminal law, but also by administrative law. You know, in a lot of places, it's very difficult to get a criminal prosecution. But just because someone is not criminally liable doesn't mean they should stay in their position, either in government, in the university, or whatever. And so the question is, do you have criminal law that is complemented by administrative sanctions? And oftentimes, how can I say this, administrative sanctions or non-criminal sanctions are far more effective. It's just one aside to this. I worked, as I told you, in the UN World Bank program on preventing money laundering, basically stolen assets from going to other countries. One of the things that is being used now, and it's being used all over the European Union, most notably recently in Romania, is the taking away of funds, not through criminal action, but through civil action, in which you it's called non-conviction-based forfeiture, in which a person is accused of this, there is no criminal action, but they're forced to present evidence that they got the money legally. If they can't, the state has a right to take it under civil law. Now, a lot of people say, well, wait a second, does that violate human rights? Actually, the European Union's Court of Human Rights have found it a totally reasonable way to deal with corruption. So you've got a lot of tools. So, and the question comes back, what will work in Macedonia? What, as a journalist, are you going to look at and say, why don't we have this? Wouldn't this have an impact? I'm in no position to tell Macedonia what is the best set of tools. But I can tell you there are a number of tools out there that deal effectively with corruption and really prevent corruption in not only the European Union, but in the Balkan states, in the Baltic states, and in fact throughout the world. And so, as I would say, that's the best defense against corruption is a good offense.
In our country are announced amendments to the criminal code in the area of abuse of office, but the assessments are that the determination of the types of abuse is too general. How this issue is regulated in other European countries?
Okay, when we look at this, the abuse of office, as I've told you, has to be defined specifically. To basically say that it's abuse of office is illegal. The question is, what kind of abuse of office? Are you using your position to get money for yourself or your family? Are you using your position to influence on behalf of your friends or your own religious organization? I know that in working in Serbia, I found that, again, certain churches had defenders in the government who funneled all sorts of illegal contracts to even churches. So the question basically is, no one should be above the law, have tools in place to prevent them from abusing their office. They have no business saying, you should buy this, or you should contribute to this religious organization for religious holidays. Government officials have to be separate and apart from religious organizations, charitable organizations. That's not saying that religion or charities aren't important. It's just not the business of government to advocate on their behalf. And so there are a lot of tools. And again, I can refer back to the technical guide. I can give you dozens of examples, both in the region as well as around the world, where abuse of office has been dealt with effectively and, in fact, implemented in ways that reduced. Again, we're never going to end this, but reduce significantly the abuse of office by public officials.
As digitalization is being increasingly implemented around the world, in North Macedonia, digitalization of the public administration has just started. Do you think that we are lagging behind?
Actually, everybody's lagging behind. There are wonderful tools, absolutely wonderful tools for public administration, critically important in terms of things like effective asset declaration systems. I've been working for several years with the Serbian government to try and more effectively utilize their asset declarations or financial disclosures. Slightly different, but there's all sorts of guidance. There's a wonderful World Bank publication on how to implement and how to make it more effective, how to review them, how to analyze them, how to use them in civil and criminal court. So there are tools like that. In addition, in terms of computers, budgeting, public budgeting, finance, and procurement really need to be on the in computers, and also as publicly visible as possible, because of all things that in effect lead to corruption, it's the procurement systems. Either they're not effective, they're not protected. And the problem with a government procurement for anything, from school books to defense equipment to buildings, is there are, according to my colleagues at the World Bank, there are 12 different ways of corrupting a procurement, from the very beginning to the very end of it. And so the point basically is, what systems, computer systems, are in place to affect that? That's where I would start. If you want directly to have an impact on corruption, computerized asset declaration systems and evaluation systems would be very helpful. But public contracting, procurement, and implementation, distribution of funds really is the starting point. And all public services are wrestling with this now. Having said that, there are incredible free resources that governments can use through the UN, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, but there are also sorts of other elements. There's an IBM system basically for helping governments utilize computer programs, not their IBM programs, but computer programs generally to deal with all of this. And I'm just beginning. It's true in Great Britain. There is a French system. There is a Swiss system that out of Geneva that is working very well, very effectively in terms of computer utilization, for example, in the whole issue around procurement. So the materials, the tools are there. You don't have to go it alone, and unfortunately, I think a lot of people feel that they do. But in fact, you can get the resources. They're available in multiple languages, and I know they've been provided in other Baltic states as well. I'm sorry, Balkan states. I said Baltic. I apologize.
Public administration digitalization will require civil servants to learn new skills and its organization to be more oriented. What is your advice in this regard?
Well, you start with mid-level managers. And again, these same resources I'm mentioning provide the training. They can provide the training, most of it free of charge. It's not like the government's going to have to spend a fortune to do this. And then they'll provide training for the staff in terms of doing this. Again, it doesn't take computer expertise. A lot of people feel that, they have to program this. A lot of canned programs, that is, programs that have actually been developed and can be moved into other systems. Procurements are procurements. I'm sorry, contracts are contracts. And you can track and trace these in effective sorts of ways. The tools are there. Several of the organizations I've mentioned, in fact, the EU itself, as part of the accession process, will provide this training. I know this because I know other countries that have gone through accession. Part of the system was, in fact, to get computerized systems in place. The question then is, are they being used effectively? And that's your job as a journalist, because you can put all the systems in place, but if nobody's using them, they're absolutely useless. So the key basically is not to get them only, but to make sure they're being used and used effectively to prevent corruption.
And for the end, will digitalization reduce corruption, or do you think that corruption will still find a way to break through?
Corruption will always find a way to break through. We're always chasing corruption. But countries with effective systems, I think tragically, up till the Soviet invasion, the country of Georgia had probably one of the most effective anti-corruption systems in the former Soviet republics. It was amazingly effective, from their asset declaration system to other sorts of systems that were in place. So you can do it. It's not 1,000 miles away. The point basically is, unless you're chasing corruption and making sure that as you implement, as you affect all of this, that corruption is in effect continuing to have a lesser and lesser impact, they will always find ways to be corrupt. I will tell you, I sat on a board as one example, and the problem is human beings.
That's right.
I sat on a board investigating a physician that stole 1 million doses of penicillin in Africa. And his justification was his daughter was at Harvard Medical School in the U.S., and if she got her medical degree, she would cure more people than 1 million doses of penicillin. People will justify anything to be corrupt in their own mind. That's true in the U.S. We still have corrupt officials, but we arrest them, we put them in jail, we get them out of public office. And I think the key, basically, from my point of view, in the region, the Balkan region, there are too many people that wait around for the criminal justice system to make a final determination. There is nothing wrong with firing someone or putting them on permanent leave so they cannot have a continued impact. I saw this in Egypt. They fought tooth and nail. This is years ago, to try and get these people criminally convicted. And you could bribe the judge, you will love this, to delay the trial 60 to 70 years. Years, not months, 70 years. So the person who was up for trial would be dead by then. The point basically is that whatever you think about the crime, there's got to be systems to get them out of their office and public service, or at least put them on leave without any impact on the office they were in. There are all sorts of, again, tools to deal with this. I won't go back to the technical guide, but there is a long discussion on how to create effective tools in this area. So there's no excuse. We know what systems will work. The question is, what will work in North Macedonia? That's the question.
Mr. Gilman, thank you for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
It's been my pleasure as well, and I can't wait to come back and visit with you in North Macedonia and actually enjoy the welcome and the friendliness of your wonderful people.
Thank you.
Have a good day, and we'll speak with you later.
You too. Goodbye.